You're on the record.
On the record.
Okay, so I wanted to interview you because you had had a triangle sighting. So maybe we could just start and talk about that if you like.
Yeah, no, that'll be fine. And I made sure to pull my notes here because at my age I can forget it. At least it's all documented, right? The uh, what happened very simply for context, and I'll make this a short version. You can then probe later if you like.
Okay.
My wife and I, this was in 1979, a million years ago. We're driving to her parents' house in suburban New Jersey. It was about 11 o'clock at night. And I'm driving along, and as usual, I'm chattering, and my wife, Loretta, is fine. And all of a sudden, she says, out of the clear blue sky, "That's not a plane." And I kind of stopped and said, "Huh?" And she said, "Look, that's not a plane." And I look out the window, and what do I behold but a, a big black triangle with points of light at the apices, et cetera. Um, Fairly sizable. As I said, I had the presence of mind to just stick out my arm, and the object was the size of my fist at the end of my arm. All right, in the sky. And I'm driving, this is the suburbs and everything's normal. And I said, also, it's important for people to know that this was at night, 11 o'clock. And as I later noted, you could not see starshine through this, it certainly appeared to be solid. And I said, "Well, I don't know about this," and then it was gone. So we drove a little further, and we look up, and lo and behold, there it is again. Now, I've later concluded that what we actually saw were two triangles, both heading in the northeasterly direction. I saw one, then we drove, further, and then I saw another, the same trajectory, and away it went. And the second sighting, I was able to get out, park, pull over, get out of the car, and look at the thing as it was in no hurry, you know, it was, so you could see it. Now, oh, excuse me, I'm a newspaper guy. My wife is a university professor. We didn't have any particular interest in UFOs before this. I mean, I don't know why this would have happened. But there it was. And as I've noted, our responses were not like fear or anything like that. Our responses were mostly awestruck. You know, now the location I'm talking about is where my wife and I come from. It's within just 25 to 30 miles of three major airports: Kennedy, Newark, and LaGuardia. All right, because we're in
Mhm.
the New York metro area, even though we're in New Jersey. So
Mhm.
we've been accustomed, my wife and I, to seeing air traffic of all varieties at all times of day and night, all seasons of the year. You know, this is a heavily traveled air corridor, obviously, and we'd never seen anything like this.
Mhm.
So what I did, I'm going to wrap it up here. What I did is I got back in the car, and based on my experience as a journalist, I said, let's not talk about this now. Right. We're not talking about this now. And we drove a short distance to my in-laws' house. And when we got there, I said, you go over there and write down everything you saw, and I'll go over here and write down everything I saw. And 20 minutes passed, whatever it may be, and we got together, and there was no question we saw the same thing, whatever it was. So I did not have, I didn't have what people are now calling ontological shock. I mean, I wasn't, but I definitely was it definitely opened a door that for me was already half open, but was now fully open. that obviously there's a lot going on in this world than we really know or understand. And
Hmm.
we've got to like lower our knowledge walls and barriers so that we can see over it occasionally. Because it was like a glitch in the matrix. It's like, what
Mm.
the hell is this? So that's the story.
Okay. Wow.
Oh, also, I want to point out that this is all occurring in that window period when there was an enormous amount of UFO activity in the Hudson Valley, New York.
Hmm.
All right. And basically, this sounds like the same thing. And what's interesting is if I'm correct in saying that they were heading in a northeast direction, the Hudson Valley is the northeast of
Yeah.
here.
Okay.
All right. So this is just a speculation. I have no idea, you know, but I just thought I'd mention that because there was some kind of flap, some kind of hotness happening at that period, specifically with black triangles in this geographical area.
Hmm.
I mean, the black triangles in the Hudson Valley were seen by hundreds of people,
Uh-huh.
hundreds of people. It made the news, not naturally on and on and on. Um, but I wasn't aware of this at the time. Now, to tell you how much of a Boy Scout I am, right? I go and I pick up the phone and I called the police. I'm laughing at myself, remembering that I didn't know what else to do. All right. I called the police. Very professional, courteous officer heard me out. And is what I asked him is, are people calling to report anything odd up there in the skies over the town, over the area? And he sounded vaguely amused, but he was very polite, very respectful. He said, no, we have not been receiving any calls like that. I said, thank you, officer. Click. All right. The next day when I went into my newspaper office, I sought out the reporter we had that covered the airports and the aviation beat,
Mhm.
and I told him the story. And Tim, God rest his soul, was very open to hearing this because he had heard a lot of stories at this point from people. Although he was not a believer but he was open-minded. I said, I want to speak to somebody at the airport. Now, by the airport, it is now called Newark Liberty. Back in those days, it was just Newark, New Jersey Airport. Um, and I said, can you do that? And he finally plugged me into an executive down there who was willing to believe that this was a private inquiry. Because the last thing the airport wants to do is to talk to the media on the record about UFOs. Right. And I
Mhm.
said, I want you to check, is it possible to check what was going on and give me some kind of possible explanation for what we saw? And the guy said, all right, I'll do that as long as it's off the record, yada, yada. And he called back the next day and said, no, we have no data here that I've seen that would account for what you're reporting to me. And I believed him. I didn't have any reason to believe I was being deceived. My BS detector was not flickering or anything. And
Mhm.
so the next step would have been, obviously, to call McGuire Air Force Base in Burlington County, New Jersey, approximately 60 miles from the sighting, which of course in airspace is nothing. But I wasn't dumb enough to think the Air Force was going to talk to me about this. Right. So I didn't
Right.
make the call. I never made the call, but I considered doing it. No, they're not going to talk to me or any member of the media about anything like this back then in 1979.
Mhm.
Um, so this was the beginning for me of a long period of interest and following UFO affairs that kind of simmered and went away and on and on and on until the O'Hare sighting in Chicago in I think that was 2006,
Yeah.
which blew up. I mean,
I think.
Anderson Cooper was on CNN talking about this, and I said, oh, I have to do something. So I found a UFO group in New Jersey, and it was of real people. There were some academics, there were some science people, but most of this group were just ordinary citizens And on and off, I began attending the meetings for like better part of 30 years.
Yeah.
And yeah, and but my point with this is that it opened this door to this entire UFO paranormal community that, in my mind, from popular prejudice, these are all lunatics. They're all wearing tinfoil hats. These people are crazy. Well, obviously, attending the meeting, meeting these people, that idea blew up in a week.
Mhm.
These were not crazy people. Well, there may have been some, but these were not crazy people. These were not delusional fanatics. They were not anything like that. Most of them either were experiencers or were close in some way with experiencers. And everybody was here seeking the same thing, which is answers.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I learned an awful lot about ufology and its history and its personalities. I learned uh, well the sociology of UFO paranormal, the people
Yeah.
story of UFO paranormal is almost as fascinating and sometimes more fascinating than I think the UFO reports, you know.
Yeah.
So that kind of
Mhm.
hooked me right there. All right. And these are a lot of really interesting folks. And as I joked to people, you really don't know who's standing next to you at the supermarket. and right and what they have been through and experienced in their lives. Because it soon became apparent to me that an awful lot of people have what we'll call I would let's call them glitch experiences of one
Yeah.
sort or another, whether it's ghosts or UFO or Sasquatch or whatever it may be. An awful lot of people have these experiences, but yet hardly anybody talks about it.
Yeah. It's really
Right. It's so
interesting.
right. So it creates this impression that it's this small, tiny group of people with wild claims, whereas actually these claims extend probably over millions of people in our population right now. It's just that nobody's going to talk about it. And um, that's I I don't know how you open up conversations anyway with people about this. So,
Mhm.
I really haven't done that. My wife and I really didn't discuss this sighting, um, except within a very small circle for years. For years, we did not discuss what we saw
Mhm.
because of the built-in prejudice that we have as Americans that this stuff can't be so, and it's all, and only after O'Hare and other things, I began to let it be known that yeah, I had some experience in this area. So if anybody
Mhm.
needs to talk about it, if come talk to me, and maybe I can point you in the right direction or whatever.
Mhm.
But I've not been an activist, if you know what I
Yeah,
mean. Yeah,
I do.
yeah,
Yeah, a disclosure activist
yeah.
is
Yeah.
yeah. Or do you
What
think
about
there's a pro
what about
what
you?
about
What you brought you into this interesting world?
Well, I was into like monsters when I was a little
Mhm.
kid.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
I yeah, I think I told you this before. I actually lived in New Jersey when I was a little kid because I was a
And you went
military
looking for the
brat.
Jersey Devil. You went looking for the Jersey Devil, right?
Yeah, yeah. We actually I actually visited the Pine Barrens. I
Mhm.
remember vaguely. But I also remember that like that's like the first thing I looked up at the library was the Jersey Devil. And and I also was really into the Loch Ness Monster. So uh and I had nightmares about like sea monsters and stuff like that when I was a kid. But my nightmares were really scary, but they really ended up kind of, I would end up being fascinated with the things that showed up in my nightmares.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so with UFOs, it was kind of I just was fascinated with this idea, I kind of imagined it being more like how Charles Fort talks about like creatures, or something like that, and not, I always kind of found the sort of popular depictions of like spacecraft with aliens in them. I always kind of found that kind of corny or
Yeah, yeah,
something.
yeah.
No offense to anyone, but like I
Why
never, yeah,
why should they have two arms and two legs like we do? Why? Right. How
exactly.
come they have
Yeah.
one head, not several? Why? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
It's just, it's not realistic. And it seems kind of boring to me, I guess. Like, I think I don't know, maybe I'm privileged in a way or somehow, and I'm not really sure how, but I never really, I kind of could always sense that there was like a sort of woo component to it, and that really turned me off to it, where it's like someone starts going to this very flowery narrative that's has a very, you know, that has a lot of spiritual connotations to it, and I'm kind of as a child and still even today, like I think the most interesting thing to me is to find some crazy thing in the physical world, in the meat space world that is really crazy. Like, you know.
Yeah,
So,
no, I agree. I agree.
yeah.
I think there's a little part of all of our souls
Mm,
that keeps asking us, isn't there more? Isn't
hmm
right, right? Yeah. Is this all there is, this life that we're living right now? And I think we all have
hmm
that little yearning for transcendence or whatever you call it. But
hmm
you talk about the woo factor.
hmm
I thought it was fascinating for me to realize that you open a door labeled UFO and you step through that door and you find all this other stuff,
hmm
fairies, gnomes, ghosts, cryptids, and the whole range of paranormalia opens up. There's like
hmm
almost a unified field back there. So I tell
hmm
people, just if you're going to go looking, be critical, because it's a mountain of things. Most of them are probably BS or fantasy, but within that mountain somewhere, you may find a connection to something that's real in your life. You know,
hmm
so I had no idea. And also, it's interesting that actually back when I got involved in this area, everything was heavily siloed. Meaning, if you
hmm
were a UFO person, you didn't want to hear about hauntings. If you were a haunting person, you didn't want to hear about UFOs. Everybody stuck with their tribe. I'm seeing a lot less of that now, which
hmm
has both good and bad aspects. Um, it's good that people are broadening, their viewpoint here. The bad aspects is just a general chaos, right?
Yeah.
Right, where everything starts running into other, and
Yeah, everything
yeah,
can,
yeah,
people are just like,
and
oh, it's all
you
blending
pointed out
together.
the spiritual aspect of this, meaning that a lot of people don't want to go there, but for I definitely know people for whom UFO is effectively their religion.
Yeah.
All
hmm
right. Now, by religion, a lot of people I mean Christianity, I mean Judaism, I mean religion in its institutionalized form. By religion, I mean that thing within ourselves that provides us with a sense of the meaning of our lives, the meaning of our existence, the foundations for the values we believe in. So I'm detaching it totally from a given narrative or tradition of religious institutions.
hmm
But and I there are people who embrace the UFO mythos, as I call it, literally as their functional, practical religion. Um,
Mhm.
like, let's say, Christians, there are some who believe that the ETs are going to be here to save us. They're going
Mhm.
to come down and save us from ourselves. There are others who believe that the ETs are essentially the devil. They're going to
Mhm.
come control us. They're going to come take us over, on and on and on. And yeah, and an entire mythology has spread from this. And um,
Mhm.
it's this religious aspect of UFO paranormal that people need to check as they go forward. Now, I've
Yeah.
joked that I was neither my wife nor I were ever affected on that level by the sighting we had. As I would joke to people, I don't need a religion; I already have one. Right? So I've already got one, so I don't need another one. All right, but in a time when there's a lot of disillusionment with institutions, religious institutions, in a time when um, some religious institutions are behaving in frankly scandalous ways, right? They're
Mhm.
betraying their own message.
Mhm.
Um, you have people who are seeking and searching, and
Mhm.
some of them find that sort of religious validation in UFO paranormal. Okay, yeah,
Yeah, I think well, I mean, I don't want to pretend like I don't find spirituality in this topic at all. And
yeah,
what I find myself comparing it to a lot is the like um spiritual discourse traditions, like
yeah,
for example in rabbinical Judaism. Um, And also in Christianity, there's this rich tradition of people trying to sort of figure out God.
mhm,
And Isaac Newton was working in that.
yeah,
He was a Christian. He was kind of I don't remember what his theology that he believed in, but it was kind of a fringe theology, like
yeah,
monism or something like that. I don't remember, but yeah, like the reason that he was studying, the nature of like things like light and gravity and stuff that like is because he was trying to understand the nature of God. And yeah, I think that's really how see or sort of conceptualize what I get out of it
mhm,
personally.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. No, it's interesting that you bring that up because a lot of people don't know that about Newton.
Hmm.
Oxford has tons of handwritten research notes by Newton having to do specifically with paranormal or hermetic topics
Hmm.
or trying to find hidden information in the Bible kind of thing. I mean, they have shelves and shelves and shelves of it. Nobody talks about it. All they
Yeah.
talk about is the science. But
Hmm.
you're right. Newton's primary focus was essentially spiritual and theological, and that's the reason he did the science. All
Hmm.
right.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because so few people actually know this. And I haven't necessarily seen Oxford or any academic institution express much interest in bringing out these writings by Newton so that we can have a look at them. That basically isn't happening, and I don't
Yeah,
know why.
which
Yeah,
I would certainly want to look at more of that stuff personally
yeah,
because the older that I get, the more I think that the roots of UFO culture kind of go back,
hmm,
like they keep going back. Like there's that you see threads of
hmm, yeah,
representations and ideas kind of popping up like in earlier and earlier centuries, and I don't mean to say like I don't think that that's because like there's always been like the NHI coming in there like
hmm,
craft or something since ancient times, but really that like um that there's an incredible like cultural richness that feeds into what became sort of UFO culture, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, it's much more complicated than people realize, and it is certainly way beyond the complication of stupid ideas, like tinfoil hat people. All right.
Hmm.
There are tinfoil hat people within the community, but the most of the people in the community, in my experience, as I said, are the kind of folks that you could, hang out with at the grocery and never realize. I mean, they're
Hmm.
completely normal people, except
Yeah.
for this area, perhaps. But
Hmm.
somebody who is religious in the conventional sense is not thought to be out of line. But if you are unconventional in this sense, for some reason, this is out of line. So you
Hmm.
can talk about Jesus or Buddha all you want, and everybody will go, "Oh yeah, okay, okay, okay." You start talking about the UFO stuff, and it's like, you know. But that is the impact also of our pop culture, right? Which has been, as Robbie Graham wrote about in his excellent book on the silver screen. Uh, so much of the UFO world now is actually seems to be a direct outgrowth of movies and other pop culture, you know.
Yeah.
And
I
yeah,
haven't read that, but yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah. There's a
Robbie
huge.
Graham has at least two really excellent books. One is Silver Screen, Saucers and Silver Screen, which is a
Okay.
history of
Yeah.
the movies. The other is called Reframing the Debate, which is an anthology full of perspectives by various famous ufologists on where we are today and what could it all mean. Two great books. I want to take a minute or less to
Okay.
pay some debts. All right. Because, I did not arrive where I am today with all this knowledge in my brain. Um, there are, when you go out, as you know all too well, when you go out into the cyber world and you're in the UFO para, you are meeting the best and worst of humanity, right, right, right there in your living room, right? But there, there absolutely are wonderful people and terrific researchers out there
Mhm.
doing work that deserves to be recognized and known better.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and there are people from whom I've learned an enormous amount. I want to mention Jack Brewer.
Oh,
I want
yeah.
yeah, yeah, I want to mention Erica Lukes,
Hmm.
Pat Tanner Boyle and his crew,
Hmm.
um, Dean Johnson, who writes very technical analyses of what's going on in the halls of Congress.
Hmm.
Um, I suspect he's an attorney. He sounds like one. And I'm
Yeah.
looking over this list of John Greenwald at Black Vault,
Hmm.
Red Pill Junkie at Daily
Hmm.
Grail.
Hmm.
Looking. Jerry Clark. Um,
Hmm.
Newly acquainted to me, and but not uh, as people, but not as types of the work that Jeff Knox does in UFO history, which is, I mean, an incredible labor that he does day after day. Steve
Yeah.
Long is terrific, and
Hmm.
I'll just leave it at that. These are and I know that I've left people out, so I apologize in advance. But there are people you can find out there that are either they could be on one side or the other of the believer skeptic thing, but they're honest people and they do hard work, and you can agree or disagree. Um, um, but they bring receipts. I appreciate people who bring receipts,
Yeah.
who back up every claim they make. And I'll accept certain instances where anonymity is legitimate, where some amount of care and caution needs to be taken because there are national security issues
Hmm.
involved with the UFO thing in a big way. I mean, there are low overflights of our nuclear facilities if
Hmm.
by unknown people. I mean, if this is actually the case, this is a serious issue. All right.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So there is some need for secrecy. There is some need for discretion. But otherwise, go to town, have fun. You know, yeah,
Cool. Thank you. So let's go back to your sighting. I had a question.
sure.
You kind of talked about um, the what the triangles looked like and sort of where they were going, but was there anything unusual about how they were moving?
Yes. And this is difficult to how they were moving just looked kind of uncanny. Um, they gave more the impression of floating rather than flying. All right. This is very diff. I can see it in my head. This is very difficult, even for me as a writer, to put into words. There was something seemingly qualitatively different about the nature of their motion than anything that I'd ever seen up there in the sky. First of all, for this object, well, we know from my fist to the sky business that either this object was very large or very close. And I was not able to determine anything. It is in a mountainous area, and it cleared the top of the Watchung Mountains, and in the most Watchung Mountains. In New Jersey, the Watchung Mountains are 900 feet high.
Yes.
Right, in other places, they would be the Watchung Hills, right? But the Watchung Mountains in New Jersey, 1,000 feet is a mountain. I've seen the Rocky Mountains. Okay, and I know the truth about this now, but they definitely cleared I would say like the 900-foot top of this ridge where they were. So I
Hmm.
have an idea, yeah, but how close they were and how big they were, difficult to say. But it certainly wasn't a pinpoint dot, in the sky or on and on. The move or the moving the motion was smooth, gliding. Um, uh, as I said, it felt more like floating than you know. And as I said, they could not have been going very fast because, as I said, I had time the second time around to pull over, get out of the car, and watch them go, like that. And so I can't. Their speed for something that large, well, that seemed to be that large, to be moving that slowly, struck me as very strange.
Hmm.
Certainly outside my experience of air traffic.
Hmm.
Uh, and I've sometimes wondered, um, just as a speculation, I've had some conversations about this with people who know about holograms, whether these might have been holograms. That is, were they really solid objects, or were they some kind of projections? All right. And of course, I have no answer to that, but they certainly appear to have been solid objects. If they weren't solid, the clouds and starshine would have been visible through them, and they were not visible through them. It was just this black thing, you know. Just at 3 points, little bright lights at the points. The only substantial difference between uh, my wife's account and my account is she saw the lights as blue. I saw them as white. Otherwise, everything lined up,
Hmm.
you know. Um, uh, so I mean, I remember vividly. I still have vivid memories of the nature of the motion that I was witnessing when I had the sighting. I still find it very difficult to describe because I really can't think of anything in nature or tech that I know of that moves like that.
Hmm.
So there we are. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you don't think that it could be like an experimental craft or something like that? Like
Yes.
maybe.
Yeah. That's my conclusion. I've reached two conclusions after what? All this time in ufology. The first conclusion I reached is that I had to resign myself to the the probability that I would actually never have an answer, a definitive answer. I'm
Hmm.
not going to get a call from somebody in a uniform to tell me, oh yeah, this is what happened. Right. It's ours and this is what it was. That's never going to happen.
Hmm.
I That's the first conclusion. And then what was the second conclusion? I already lost my train of thought.
It's okay.
Um,
Take your time.
yeah. Uh, well, we'll just leave it be. I
Okay.
I I reached the conclusion that I'm never going to get an answer. Oh, but the most probable answer, the most likely answer is it's ours, and we're not telling anybody.
Hmm.
But then that raises the other questions. If if I'm the Air Force or whomever I am, and I'm assuming when I say ours, I mean U.S. I don't mean human. I mean, I guess it could be Chinese. I don't, but U.S.
Hmm.
Um, uh, if you're going to play around with your toys, your secret toys, why would you do this in a densely congested population and air traffic area?
Yeah.
That is, when the pilots at O'Hare basically, and when the pilots and the other staff people at O'Hare in Chicago began leaking to the Tribune paper, the reason why is they were scared. They were scared that there was going to be the possibility of some horrible accident above their airport when we've got this stuff up there. What is it? So
Hmm.
they had a legitimate concern. I mean, the legitimate concern is I'm going to fly, my aircraft into O'Hare Airport and hit something, and you know, yeah, yeah. But why would you play like that?
Hmm.
You're here in Mountainside, New Jersey, Union County, New Jersey. You are 10 miles from Newark Airport. You are 30 miles from Kennedy. All right. If you want to stretch it, you're about 60 miles from Philadelphia,
Hmm.
and all these airports. Why would you do this? Why would you? I mean, and then of course the second question: if I were going to test out, my new toy, I would do it out at Groom Lake in Nevada, where everybody
Hmm.
expects weird stuff, so you can get away with weird stuff.
Hmm.
Why would you do it in a densely populated area in a dense traffic corridor? But the reason then the spinoff of this, another spinoff. Why did my wife and I see this? And apparently no one else in the world saw this. All right. The
Yeah.
cops said, no, we have no reports, nothing in the newspapers, there was no, to the best of my knowledge, my wife and I are the only two people walking the planet who saw what we saw, even though there are 9 million people in New Jersey. Um, and in the
Hmm.
area we were was among the densest concentration of people. All right. As I said, we're now, you know, we're now less than 25 miles from Manhattan. And why did we see this? And apparently no one else saw this.
Yeah.
And you just scratch your head because I have no illusions whatsoever that some ET is trying to reach me, and establish contact or any of that business. That makes me smile. The idea that there's so little evidence for physical ET that we have to invent a C5 category, as Dr. Stephen Greer has done. You want to talk to the aliens? I'll take you on a meditative thing where we will connect psychically with the aliens. And here we have the woo factor. Whoa, everything's going right. We'll connect psychically with the aliens, and the aliens, yeah, I don't know, no, that's what?
Yeah.
What? Yeah, yeah. I mean, why bother to do that when you can, if you want to be, as I have certain dear friends, if you want to be a good Buddhist and you want to spend, to 90 minutes a day in meditation, great, go do that. But they don't come back telling me that they're getting messages from either the spirit realm or, ETs. I'm not hearing this from the people I know who are meditators, who really good meditators. I don't hear this. Yeah.
So another question is what did they sound like?
Completely silent,
Okay.
completely silent.
Hmm.
Absolutely, which also was kind of added to the general uncanny. nature of the experience because almost all aircraft in that area make noise. They're
Yeah.
coming in low, they're setting themselves up for landing, or else they're taking
Mhm.
off. Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of aircraft noise, but completely silent. And there were no other craft up there either, so I couldn't really do any measuring in that way. No, it
Mhm.
was if it wasn't for the fact that Loretta was looking out the window at a certain point in the drive, this would have happened. We would have been as unconscious of this as everybody else
Mhm.
because there were no strange sounds up there to attract attention. You know,
Yeah.
you know.
It's
So
interesting.
no, yeah, it's completely silent.
Mhm. Have you ever been in the military?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I spent 3 years in the Navy.
Okay.
Yeah. This was at the end of what used to be called the Kitty Cruise. The Kitty Cruise was an enlistment that was 3 years and not four. Because now the standard enlistment is four. All right.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that was I was a hospital corpsman, meaning a medic, because I had vague ideas that I might want to become a doctor. So let's give this a shot. Let's see what this is.
Mhm.
Um, um, and it was an interesting and valuable experience. I mean, I definitely discovered I didn't want to be a doctor. All right, right. At least the doctors that I was exposed to worked very hard. And the other thing that was kind of scary, the deeper you get into it, is the degree of responsibility that you have for other people's lives and welfare, which
Mhm.
can be a really, really heavy thing, to
Mhm.
deal with. And I didn't want to do that either. You know,
That's fair.
this is the amusing thing. I was in the Navy. I never saw salt water. I was in the Navy. I never set foot on a ship. All right.
Mhm.
Vietnam was roaring at this point. And the Marines, who were sustaining, very heavy damage, their medical care is with the U.S. Navy. So they were sending back to the naval hospitals, all the
Mhm.
Marines and that needed to be treated. And uh, uh, the bulk of the patients at that time were Marines, not sailors.
Mhm.
And so they needed everything. Uh, they needed a really heavy component of care staff at that point. So where was I? I was billeted at the Naval Hospital Great Lakes, Naval Hospital Annapolis, and then Naval Hospital Bethesda. Yeah, I never left. I never left the country. The only salt water I saw was a run out to Rehoboth Beach in Delaware, which is where you go in Washington when you want beach. All right, and I visited a friend of mine on a ship that was in port. So I got inside a ship, but I was never on the ship. I was,
Mhm.
billeted on a ship.
Okay,
We
that
had
makes sense.
far too many badly broken Marines coming back every day. So,
Mm.
you know. And if you were smart and you were good, I mean, I did interesting. The worst tour of duty, time of duty I had during that experience was the 2 weeks that I was an intern on the pediatric ward. All right.
Mhm.
I found sick kids were really not something I was prepared to handle, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so I remember that painfully. I mean, I
Mhm.
did, I did, I did the job on it. I didn't fall apart, but the condition of some of these kids, you have to ask yourself, well, how could this be? But I also did a month on the psych ward, which was fascinating.
Mhm.
Um, before it, I generally speaking, I was found to be best in ER situations, crisis situations. I even delivered a baby
Oh,
because
wow.
the doctor got there too late. That was yeah. And they let you do all kinds of things back then in the military. You could run IVs. You could that would only be done by MDs in the civilian world. but you could run
Yeah.
IV, the MDs or RNs or people like that. So it was
Mhm.
interesting, but no, 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 no medicine in my future. No. Yeah.
Okay. I don't think I have any more questions about your triangle sighting, but if there's anything you'd like to add about that particular sighting, uh, you can. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Let me just, as I said, I have my cheat sheet here. First of all, I want to make it very clear to our audience that when Loretta and I had this experience, there was no alcohol or drug use involved of any sort. We were stone cold sober. So I just want that on the record. All right.
Have you had any other? Well, I remember I was listening to your inner, or when Tanner chatted with you on getting spooked. You had mentioned a I don't remember who it was involved, but you had mentioned someone like being able to guess another person's social
Oh,
security number.
oh, yeah, yeah. There's a complete report on that site. It's 3 pages out of the book. But anyway,
Okay.
um, I I had I had a really close friend, a girlfriend, in fact, and now we're going back into my high school years. This is goes
Hmm.
back so far, and she got heavy into spiritualism. So she got heavy into seances and mediums and all of that. And another friend of mine went in that direction too. And so I ended up meeting through them basically what you might call their guru, except that it wasn't really, it was like a teacher, the mentor. And his name was William Daught, and he was an ordained spiritualist minister in Paterson, New Jersey. Now, when people, as I said, when people tell me there's no such thing as UFOs, or it's all a mistake, I mean, I have an answer. Well, we saw them. End of discussion. We can discuss what they are or why they are or anything else, but I'm afraid I'm not getting into discussion of whether they exist because I know they exist. End of story. This was a similar thing with psychic phenomena. Bill Daught with psychic phenomena. I know about the fraud and the craziness and the grift and all of this that's involved in everywhere actually in UFO paranormal, but I know all about that. So, but if there are 1,000 fake psychics, all you need is one real one to like settle this issue. And I would definitely nominate Bill Daught as he would be my candidate. Bill was very unusual and unconventional insofar as he was not in the least dainty or precious about what he did. Um, he would accept any psychic challenge. He wouldn't get into an argument like the vibes are wrong or your attitude is wrong or. So he went on the Long John Nebel radio show, which was a local New York area like ancestor of Rogan or oh my heavens, yeah, well, um, and
I like John Long John Neville. I don't like
Yeah.
Joe
No,
Rogan.
no, I don't like Joe. No, I don't like Joe Rogan. But I mean, it was a kind of it was a radio show where who is the same Art Bell? He was like a precursor to Art Bell. That's a better way to put it. All right. So Neville says to him, Neville being completely skeptical and having a regular list of crazies, and he said, well, let's you want to do something psychic now, something and Bill, of course, much to his shock, said, well, yeah, why not? Live on the air, on the radio. And what they came up with, because they didn't know what else to do, is the engineer who Bill had never met was in another room, you know, doing what they do with radio. I guess there's a big window you can look through. I don't know. And I think it was Long John Nebel who said, well, what's the social security number of the guy? And
Hmm.
Bill said, oh, Bill had the guy turn around his back to him, and there was the card. So Bill couldn't see the guy's face. He couldn't see the card. He couldn't see nothing. He got the number within one digit.
Okay.
All right. Now, the odds of that happening by chance would be astronomical.
Hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
Four, two, one. You're talking nine numbers. He
Yeah.
hit eight. He hit eight numbers in the correct order, too.
Hmm.
All right. And blew one of the numbers. So this blew Long John Neville's mind. But this was not unusual with Bill Dodd. You never
Right.
know. You never knew what the hell was going to happen with Bill Dodd. We did it a couple times. We did something absolutely crazy because we were young. All right. Blind driving. All right. Blind driving means that you get into the
Oh,
Volks
okay.
bus.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
You get into the Volks bus with
Wait a minute. So have you actually done this before?
oh yeah, 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 yeah. No, I
Okay.
did this with him.
Okay.
And I actually yeah,
I see. I see. Okay. Okay.
you so you get into the Volkswagen bus with Bill, and you get out on I remember specifically New Jersey Route 3, which is an absolutely terrifying highway. All right, that goes from northern New Jersey directly into New York. So it's like madness 24/7, Route 7. All right, Route 3. And what you do is you blindfold Bill, you know, and Bill drives. And we drove miles with Bill, right, right, blindfolded. And there really wasn't any way to fake this because there was no way that he had any
Yeah.
choice over the material. There was no choice in advance as to who would do the blindfolding. It all just happened. All right. So we did this, and here I am. I'm alive. All right, great. Um, and when you asked, and would I do it today? No, right. But I
Yeah.
was like 18, 19 years old. You do what you want. All right. Uh, and you would ask Bill to explain how this is possible, and his explanation is that he has spirit guides, and the spirit guides see everything, and they tell him what to do. So if you want to go left, you want to go right, you want to slow down, you want to, great. See, he was getting in his head verbal instructions from the beyond as to how to drive at maybe 60 miles an hour on an insane highway in New Jersey.
Wow.
And there was no accidents. There were thrills and chills aplenty. All right. But this is what happened. Now, how do you explain this? Is there a possibility of fraud? Sure. There's always a possibility of fraud. I
Yeah.
mean, fraud cannot be 100% excluded, all right, from almost anything. But I
Hmm.
don't believe there was. And I saw also different manifestations of this, whatever it is he had. All right. He would know things.
Hmm.
All right. He would scare the hell out of you because he would tell you exactly what you thought, what you were thinking. All right. Now, the other thing that's interesting about Bill is that Bill was not rich and famous and had no interest whatsoever in being rich and famous. He lived in a working class neighborhood in Paterson, New Jersey, which is a working class town, gritty northeastern, town. He had a church, he had people, it wasn't. a big deal, but I mean, he had a community. He was the minister, and he was content to live on his salary and whatever donations came his way. He would cooperate with the media or the press if invited, but he never sought that attention.
Mhm.
He was living his life at a standard of his own standard of integrity, and according to his beliefs, this was a gift. It was meant for service. So you serve people to the best of your ability with this. All right, and that's what he did.
Oh.
He died in the early 80s. I believe he was in his mid 60s at that point. I'd have to
Mm.
look. And he had a bad heart. Um, but all right, so there's that. Through that crowd, I met other people and got involved in some other things. But I was much more in, I was had virtually no, before this UFO sighting, I had virtually no interest in UFOs because I thought that all of that was for children. It was Saturday morning cartoons, UFOs. But I was interested in psychic phenomena. All right, that I was interested in. So as I said, your skeptic debunker comes along and tells me there are no UFOs, and I have to say thank you, bye. So a skeptic debunker comes by and tells me there's no such thing as psychic phenomena, telepathy, telekinesis, and I have to say thank you, bye.
Yeah.
I have had personal experience that I've had personal experience where I know that you're talking through your hat when you tell me these things don't exist. But even beyond my personal experience, as you know, there's enormous documentation going back 100 years to the Society for Psychical Research in Britain, um, uh,
Yeah.
that backs up some or all of these claims about so-called extrasensory perception.
Mhm.
I don't know whether it's extra. I don't know what it is, but they do. It does happen. It does exist, and an
Mhm.
awful lot of people, ordinary folk, may experience this kind of thing once or twice in their life.
Yeah.
There are an awful lot of people who will say, "Well, my grandmother came to me in a dream,
Mhm.
and she said this, that, and the other, and it happened." You know that kind of popular. So I mean the not that I'm necessarily on the ghost trail. I've never particularly been, um uh, uh but whatever psychic phenomena means, some of that stuff is absolutely real as far as I'm concerned.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know. And Bill thought Bill thought I had a future as a psychic. You know, I was right from the start. I was pretty quick to tell Bill that no, I don't have a future. He said, "You've got it, you've got it." I said, "Okay, fine." And because I wasn't going to get into this again, you were talking religion. All right. I wasn't
Mhm.
going to get into this religious course of study, meditation, this and psychic development training. And I said, no, not happening. Just
Mhm.
if it's real, it's real. If it's there, it's there. Now let's get on with life. And occasionally, and I had some experiences. But what is interesting, and I forget who I get this from, is I remember reading that these abilities or whatever they are operate in astonishing congruence with other strange abilities like mathematical whizzes and chess whizzes, meaning that they're strongest when the person is young and healthy, and then they trail off as you grow older and older. As with other talents or skills that we may have that grind are ground down by time. Now, I'm
Mhm.
not saying that there aren't any old people psychics. Well, there are. All right. But generally speaking, it appears to be something that burns out after a while. I mean, not overwhelming, but most of the great scientists that we know basically made their important discoveries by age 30.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then like Einstein, would go on to live to like 70 odd, but never get back those original one or two things. You know, he spent the rest of his life looking for unified field theory and never found it. But
Mhm.
so with scientists and other creative people, there appears to be a peakish thing. You reach a peak when you're young and hot and pretty, or and then as you age, you lose. And I think that's the case because the only thing that happens to me now is that I recognize what Bill calls the sparkle.
Okay.
Now I'm not talking about the vampires in Twilight. That's not the sparkles I'm talking about, but it's the sense of field. I am pretty good at being able to pick out of a crowd the ones, you know, that have what I call the sparkle. And they're the ones who usually have some capacity in this area, from the rudimentary to the, very, very remarkable. When I say sparkle, it's not because you see anything. It's like a feeling of electricity with these
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
Um, uh, where was I? Yeah, but no, but I wasn't going to go into the spiritualism business. That was that was not going to happen, and I wasn't going to become anybody's disciple. This is the '60s. Leave us be. We don't trust you. You're over 30, right? This is the '60s. We're free. All right, no, we're not doing this. Um, uh, and I've never regretted that because I back away from. I'm not particularly interested in magic or it's a discussion as to what that is, but you know what we mean.
Mhm.
Yeah, not I don't in the practice of magic or in supposed conversations with the dead. Not interested.
Yeah.
Um, uh, this kind of stuff. Yeah, as I said, it's there and I've studied it and I've looked at it, but it's on this really on the side of my interests. I don't spend much time there anymore. You know.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah. Thank you. So do you have you had any other experiences that really stick out for you that were unexplained?
yeah. I have, but it follows up on what I just talked about young people. I had experiences, which I'll describe briefly in a minute, when I was a kid, including a very young kid. And as I aged, those experiences stopped.
Mhm.
I saw aura and was very surprised to learn as just a wee kid that nobody else was seeing this. All right, and no one else was seeing the things that I'm seeing, and I saw aura. I'm not around living things, including plants. On and on,
Mhm.
and it was a sheen. Um, there were different colors, but I don't know. So I what can I say? Um, uh,
Interesting.
and I said it went, and that just eventually went away. Occasionally, very occasionally, like maybe once or twice in a year, I may have a little flash of that now. But I mean, it's not a part of my life. I don't. But the other two, there were two other experiences, whether there were that I would describe that. Um, this I was still in grade school. Then I'm coming home from school and I'm stopped at the street corner waiting for the street light to change. And all of a sudden, the whole world turned upside down in the sense that I was conscious of the fact, how do I describe this? I was conscious of the fact that there appeared to be a bigger me behind the ego me. I was examining myself, experiencing myself as if I were some other person. That's Michael. It's Michael standing on the corner. That's Michael. And how weird does this sound? I know. And it passed, but I never forgot it. And then it happened once again years later. A friend of mine was years later. Yeah, I would have been in my 20s. A friend of mine had a hobby. He had his own printing press. We would do lovely little poetry books, little, handcrafted stuff. It was lovely. You could go broke doing this. Um, uh, but I'm downstairs in his basement helping him set out the press, and we're going to do this, that, and the other. And it happened again. All of a sudden, of this idea that there is somehow a bigger me behind the me of the ego consciousness I'm talking to you with now.
Mhm.
And is it me? Yes, but it is somehow not me. Well, it's not the me that I find when I look in the mirror every morning. It's not my normal conscious me. There's
Mhm.
something bigger here. There's a, as it were, like a watcher me, which the Buddhists would agree with, incidentally. Um, um,
Mhm.
and I had those two, and those were two eye-opening experiences. Now, one of my oldest friends is a shrink now, very successful shrink. And I've discussed a lot of this stuff with him, all right,
Mhm.
because and he said that what you experienced were abrupt abrupt experiences of disassociation.
That's
I
what
said,
came to my mind was
right,
dissociation. Yeah.
disassociation. And I said, well, do I need to worry about that? And he said, not really. And, I know but then the questions are, why did this happen? I mean, why did I have at least two dramatic experiences of dissociation? Um, I I think I'm in reasonably good mental health, and that's often seen as a symptom of this, that, and the other, right?
Mhm.
Um, but I have no explanation. But I did not experience ontological shock when I saw UFO. I did experience a little of that with these dual experiences.
That,
It,
yeah.
yeah, I walked away from that saying to myself, stuff really ain't what it appears to be. There's more here. But again, you don't talk to people.
Mm.
It was years before I discussed this. So I discussed this with my shrink friend, and it's dissociation, but then you have to start asking, what is dissociation? I mean, what does
Mhm.
that mean? All right, and then I'll
Yeah.
leave it there. Yeah. And
Good.
years
Good.
later, at a local college, there was actually a parapsychology lab that used students for various completely conventional parapsychology tests. So Zener cards, you've got the balls, different color balls, and you have to predict which color will drop. They're all incidentally extremely boring exercises. Right. Right. It was no surprise to me that the longer this goes on, the more the results trail off. Right. Because what happens with subjects is they become completely bored and detached from this. Oh, it's going to be a cross. Oh, going to be the yellow ball, and this goes on for 2 hours. You know,
Yeah.
uh,
Like,
uh, yeah, 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 I know. And you're in a lab, which is not an environment conducive to mystical transport,
oh
right?
no.
So, I mean, I did that too, and apparently, yeah, apparently, well, I did okay, but
Really?
all that is been bound up for years now with copyright issues and on and on and on. So it's all kind of still not out there. What I can use their names. What Douglas Dean and John Bukowski were doing during those
Hmm.
years at what was then called the Newark College of Engineering and is now known as the New Jersey Institute of Technology.
Mm.
And they get very strange, those folks, when you begin to inquire about this, because the New Jersey NJIT would rather not discuss this at all. Right. Also, in not far away was the
Strange.
Pear Lab at Princeton with Robert John,
Hmm.
and I which is no longer there. I mean, it was closed when he has since died. But I've always loved Robert John did parapsychology testing for the better part of 30 years, and he published all his findings on, and then closed the lab. And I always loved the fact that he basically said to everybody, "You've got it, right? Yeah. What? Why should I keep doing this? You've got everything. All right. If you won't accept it, you won't accept it. What can I do now? Bye." And I've always kind of laughed because he was a prickly personality, but he didn't care that mainstream science was not paying attention. It's like, I have work to do. I've done the work. I've met the criteria, right? I've submitted the articles. They've been peer reviewed, yada, yada, yada. And if you still don't believe my results, well, go F you. I loved that about him. Okay. I love that. He didn't go off in a corner and be hurt, right? I really enjoyed that aspect of his personality. Yeah, he was, but I mean, that's it. Otherwise, I was doing pretty much what everybody else does of my generation, as an
Mhm.
American, as living in America at the time. And back then, um, well, since I'm no longer young, I can't contrast the 60s mentality with, let's say, the 2020 mentality in terms of young people where they're at. But I
Mhm.
know from my own experience that there was much, the doors were wide open in, let's say, the year 1968. An
Mhm.
awful lot of people would consider and try things that would have been inconceivable to them a generation earlier. So there
Mhm.
was this great opening toward um, um, foreign, and I don't mean that with any pejorative, but foreign religions, foreign politics, stuff that was not part of the warp and woof of American life up until, I guess, the Beat period, the
Mhm.
beatnik, and the Beats, and then the hippies, and the on and on. So I don't know if there's a similar kind of openness within the younger generation today. I don't know. I hope so, but I kind of sense no. I kind
Yeah.
of sense, yeah.
Well, I mean, speaking as an aging millennial, I think there's a lot of like uh, there's there's a lot of cynicism nowadays, I think. And I think I can't speak for the younger generation, but for my generation, I think it's very hard to be hopeful, I guess one would
No,
say.
no, Rachel, I do understand that because
Yeah.
as I said repeatedly, I would not want to be 30 years old today compared to what things were like when I was 30 years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there's far less opportunity for young people.
Hmm.
Um, uh, I, as I said, I think there's far less opportunity. And the thing that I really think is sad is that you can't afford to make any mistakes
Hmm.
in your choice of school, your choice of major, your choice of job, on and on and on. You can't, you've got to get it right every time if you're going to climb the ladder.
Yeah.
Whereas my generation had the freedom, in plain English, to fuck up.
Hmm.
And we could survive that and go on to phase two. And that happened with many of us. All right.
Hmm.
I don't think that that same freedom is available to young people today. I mean, you've got
Yeah.
people to, you've now got wealthy parents, reserving places for toddlers in free schools that cost 20 grand a year. I mean, yeah, it's crazy
Yeah.
because you've got to get a head start because everything is a vicious race that goes, with only winners. There's only winners here. And if you don't do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you're never going to get to the winner circle. And I think it's cruel. And as I said, I would not want to be a young person today. And if I had a magic wand, I'd fix it, but I don't. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's life.
yeah.
So, if I could ask some follow-up questions about your experiences.
Sure.
So when you had these couple of sort of experiences where you felt like you were another self behind your ego self, what was that like qualitatively? So, like for example, did you experience yourself looking at your body outside of your body, or were you
No, yeah.
no, you
No,
were
this all happened inside my head. I did
okay.
not have an out. I didn't have an OBE. No, yeah, I didn't.
Okay.
I did. That is not what happened. The only reason that I bring this up is the fact that the phenomenon of dissociation
Hmm.
has now become implicated in all kinds of serious abusive matters by shadowy agencies, basically messing up people's lives. Right.
Hmm.
I got interested then. All right. I mean, we took MK Ultra, all of that stuff. Now, I'm not claiming any affiliation. I have no missing time anywhere. Listen, there
Hmm.
are lots of times in my life I wish I missed, right? But no, I have no missing time. No, you know, none of that business of agents in grammar school and identifying kids. And but so where did the dissociation come from? I mean, it's these were two, I think, fairly serious experiences and would have been very bad news if they hadn't been so short. I can't imagine what it would have been like the rest of the day to have carried that head around. But no, it
Hmm.
it was a few minutes at most, a few
And
minutes, yeah,
in both
each time.
cases.
Yeah.
And what were you doing specifically, and what happened like leading up to those experiences? Like if you could just go through.
In the first experience, the earliest experience, I was simply walking home from school. And if you ask me what happened in school, maybe would be an good question. Well, I have no memory of that. I
Okay.
have no memory that this was any different kind of school day than any other day. The
Hmm.
same thing when I had the experience in Jim's studio. Uh, I was there to help as the sous chef of a printer, I'm helping him. There was nothing going on. And all of a sudden, boom, this happens, you know. And it was brief. And Jim noticed, my friend Jim noticed that I was kind of disoriented briefly. But I told him it's nothing. Don't worry about it. And went on with. But I did not experience fear or any negative emotion with these experiences. I again, it was mostly in the ego track that was running in the brain. It was like, wow, what is this? You know, uh,
Hmm.
it was more surprise and curiosity, but there was no fear. I don't know. It never occurred to me, to worry about whether this would be a lasting experience or not. That would have worried me.
Yeah, I mean, if what you experienced was dissociation, which is what it sounds like to me, I
Yeah,
mean, there are people that do experience that a lot and have an ongoing issue with it,
yeah,
from my
yeah,
understanding. I'm not an expert, but I've read a little bit about dissociation, not so much in connection with MK Ultra. I wasn't even really thinking about that, but it does seem to be connected a lot to. On one hand, I think trauma and coping with negative
mm-hmm,
emotions.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
then also, on the other hand, it's associated with a lot of culture-bound syndromes, like uh, different types of possession and other things like that. So it feels like it's kind of in this borderland
yeah.
near
And
to anomalous experiences. I mean, I would treat it as like I think that's a pretty weird thing. And like you
yeah,
were saying earlier, like what even is it?
yeah.
I mean, maybe someone could give a cogent answer to that question, but I certainly couldn't.
And if dissociation is somehow rooted in some trauma,
Hmm.
as is theorized,
Hmm.
am completely unable to identify anything of that dramatic a nature in my childhood.
Hmm.
I would, if I were traumatized when as a kid, it would be normal stuff like grandpa died or the dog. Yeah, there wasn't. You're not talking about tales of abuse or anything like that. I'm so I. if I'm having a spontaneous dissociation, like maybe the age of 7, whatever it may have been, I can't explain that. The trauma explanation does not necessarily fit my experience. It just came out
Yeah,
of the blue. Yeah,
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 it seems to me like and again, I'm not an expert, but that like it kind of arises out of like a constant need to be able to separate yourself from situations
yeah, yeah, yeah.
repeatedly again and again, which doesn't sound like you had that kind of experience
No,
at all.
no. The I had the same, irritants as a kid that almost all kids have. It's
Hmm.
problems with teachers, problems with peers, but nothing, nothing, no big deal.
Hmm.
You know.
Um, so have you ever had an experience of another entity or presence that either, could have been associated with something that you experienced through your other senses, like sight and stuff like that, or maybe it's just something that you experienced internally, and it could be, maybe a person or something like that, but and anything like that.
Yes. I've had two uh, completely internal experiences, all right,
Hmm.
of presence. Um, uh, but this now we are heading into what is explicitly spiritual and religious in nature, and
Okay.
also so private I don't want to talk about it.
Oh,
Okay, and,
that's
you know
fine.
what
Yeah.
I'm just saying. But yeah, if you're talking about another presence entirely, all right, yes, I have had that experience twice, or believe I had twice. But that was, as I said, it was strictly internal, and it was like instances in which lights got turned on. All of a sudden the lights turned on. So but as I said, uh, I had these experiences. It was in the nature of brief conversation, even. All right, and but it's not something I discuss.
Wait, you're
It's
saying, okay, yeah, maybe I shouldn't ask a follow-up.
well, no, you ask away. If I don't want to answer, I won't. We're free
Okay.
here. Go ahead.
All
Yeah,
right. Thank you. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you for indulging me. Okay, so were you having a conversation when it happened, or are you saying
No,
that the conversation was a part of the experience?
the conversation was the beginning of these experiences. All of a sudden, boom. All right, and it was not. Well, when I said it was completely internal, I can't say it's completely internal because I had it certainly they were very liminal, but there was a sense actually of, let's say, what we call an entity or a presence physically located there. All right, um, with some impressions of what the appearance may have been, but that wasn't the point. The point of these experiences was to, like, give me a little message, right?
Right,
And
right.
yeah, yeah, of a spirit, and the message of a spiritual, religious nature, and that was that, you know. But uh, was it an apparition? No, I did not have an apparition of anything. I did not have. Maybe I had something like a vision. I don't know, but it was very brief. In
Hmm.
both cases, very brief. But no, I had no apparitions by ETs or angels or anything like that. Yeah.
Hmm. And you're Catholic.
I'm
Uh,
Episcopalian.
oh, I'm sorry. I
No,
don't
no,
know.
no,
I
no,
thought
no,
you were
no, no.
Catholic.
Some of my best friends are Catholic. You don't have to. uh, no, no.
What?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm Episcopalian. Which is, the famous joke about that. You ask an Episcopalian, "Are you a Catholic or a Protestant?" The answer is yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway,
My experience with Episcopalians uh, is I don't really know a lot about Episcopalianism, but my experience with people who are Episcopalians is that they tend to be more progressive and more
oh yeah.
sensible, not
No,
like
we're
evangelists or something like
no,
that.
no, no. We are so sensible that the Christian right doesn't even believe we're Christians. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Even though in my particular tradition has been around for, like, 500 years, thank you, as opposed to
Yeah.
yours that was born in Texas in 1942. But all right, but yeah, right, yeah, and we are also a church that esteems the Holy Bible and etc., but we don't believe it's a magic book. We don't believe that it contains all the answers to everything. We uh, in other words, we don't have the same we have the same respect and veneration, et cetera, but we don't have really the same attitude toward the Bible as the very right-wing people who believe apparently that God dictated every word by word. We No, 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 no. The Bible shows evidence in the hands of 87 writers and editors over a course of 3,000 years.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
So I mean, it is a book of revelation. It is a book of wisdom, but it isn't a manual for how to run a society or any of that business. It's a book of spiritual wisdom. You find there what you need. If you know, and I'll just leave it be.
No,
But no,
yeah,
we are
yeah.
we are so far out on the left that people believe there are people who definitely believe we've fallen off the edge of the earth. Yes, that's all right. We don't worry about it because we primarily think we should be much more involved in feeding the hungry, housing the homeless, and doing the stuff that apparently Christ and his crew did when they were
Hmm.
walking the earth. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like what's Christianity without Christ? I don't I'm not Christian, but like I kind
That's
of
okay.
like
Yeah.
I love Christianity's like actual teachings, you know, and not the weird sort
Yeah,
of
no, yeah, yeah, the
distortions of it.
and also
Because
my father also taught me among the various strains of wisdom that, all groups are alike insofar as that all groups contain saints and sinners. All
Mhm.
groups, contain some of the finest examples of the human race and some of the worst examples of the human race. So when you're evaluating a group, aim first for who is the best exemplar of this
Yeah.
tradition. Yeah. Focus on that. On and on. For you, uh, I really think that St. Francis of Assisi is a much more important figure than Franklin Graham. All right. Or well, yeah, I really think I'm going to listen to, those people more than I'm going to listen to what I hear on the radio.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is that God loves us so much that I hate you. You know, all right, all right. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I'm sure you've heard this. All right, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
absolutely.
no, no. I don't think that is anything approaching genuine or authentic Christianity. No, no. Which is the which in my understanding involves opening your arms wide to people in the world as opposed to stay out. No, no, no. You got to do
Yeah,
that to
it's
some. Yeah. You have to do that maybe to some, but it's not. It's not what you're here for. Yeah, as a church. I'll leave it be. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I my feeling about Christianity is that it's really a religion that's based about around love for other
Yes.
people and
Hmm.
mercy and
Yeah.
acts of
Forgiveness.
service.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Forgiveness,
Hmm.
compassion.
Hmm.
And the no, I agree with that. The Christ himself said that the two most important commandments are love God with everything you've got and love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
You know, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and I
So
really resonate with that
I
a
don't
lot.
see a lot of I don't see as much of that happening in America today as I would want to see.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Okay. So I guess I want to ask you about this sparkle again.
Okay.
But I don't really have any questions about it. I guess I want to know more about it and what kind of if you could
It's
describe it in
it's
like a
like it
narrative way. Go ahead.
yeah, it's kind of similar to at least my experience of sexual attraction, all right, in the sense that all of a sudden somebody stands out, all right, and somehow compels your attention. And as you go further, as I said, the sparkle is just like a feeling of electricity, you know, coming from that person. I mean,
Hmm.
as I said, I don't know why I chose a sexual metaphor, but I think it's accurate, at least in my experience. I mean, we all
Interesting.
sometimes lose our heart across the room to someone beautiful. All right. And even if you're married and you love your spouse and there's going to be nothing going on here, you can't deny the evidence of your feelings, for
Hmm.
this person. It's like
Hmm.
that. It's kind of like that. And I still I still get some regular pinging in that area, whereas I'm not getting pings from other stuff that I've conceivably experienced or been involved with. But it really helps me read the room, which I've had to do. It helps with understanding people, I think, some of
Hmm.
these things.
Interesting. So it's not necessarily telling you, oh, that person has psi, but it might be telling you something else. Like maybe that person might be dangerous, or maybe that they have something or
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. but I reserve the term that, as Bill Dutt would use it, the sparkle to people who would be would be considered to be psychic to a certain
I
extent.
see.
Then,
Okay.
then I mean, I
Okay.
actually think that
Okay.
we would be we'd be on Zoom here for hours if we were going to get into what I think psychic is. And but I
Yeah.
touched on this with Tanner. I'll touch on this with you. I
Mm-hmm.
don't connect what we refer to as psychic phenomena necessarily with anything religious or spiritual or
Mm-hmm.
mystical. I
Mm-hmm.
think that what we generally recognize as psychic phenomena would be telepathy, knowledge of future events, clairvoyance, on and on and on.
All right.
I think that these are, in fact, the inheritance of our animal biological selves.
Mm-hmm.
I think that our blessed gift of the prefrontal cortex has a downside. The
Yeah.
downside is that it blocks all of this input from reaching consciousness that I dare say, I think I've seen sometimes animals have. Animals, just they have this and well, anyway, but that's my theory. My theory is that we picked up stuff as we evolved and we dropped stuff while we evolved over, the zillions of years that this is happening. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that our so-called psychic phenomena are basically based in our animal biology. And our brains no longer work the way they worked, obviously, 2 million years ago or whatever. And all that
Yeah.
space is being taken up by the rational, our rational minds and our strong ego boundaries that we now have for our identity and our understanding of the world. Animals don't have that, and I think that a flood of information comes in. What we call intuition, I think that psychic phenomena are simply intuition on steroids.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We all have intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us have amazing intuition, and we call that telepathy. We call that this, we call that that. Although I do have a bit of a problem explaining actual movement phenomenon in power, psychokinesis. I believe it exists. I think I've seen it a couple times, but I would not know a theoretical foundation for that. But a theoretical foundation for most psychic phenomena, I think it can be found simply in biology if we look deep enough.
Yeah, I think that I really agree with you. Like I think that there is um I don't want to say psychic phenomena because I think it's probably more than that. Um, like I think poltergeist activity,
Mhm.
like it kind of isn't necessarily always psychic, but it's
Yeah,
often
yeah.
overlapping, and
Hmm.
is often related. But I think also that a big part of it, like you're saying, has to do with um, biological and evolutionary systems that we just
Hmm.
are not able to interface with because of the scale or complexity or obscurity of those systems.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think I really agree with
And
that.
like, and and psychic phenomena and UFOs, I mean, share in general the problem that I see all the time, that you see all the time,
Hmm.
which is bad information drives out good information.
Hmm.
Gresham's law, which was originally adopted for counterfeit currency. I mean, the more fake currency you have in circulation, the less value of the genuine. That's well, what we've got with paranormal and with UFO is the same thing. And it's the one thing that really does piss me off, that all of this time, energy, and money is being put into activities that actually are bad for genuine research. You know, um, I'm I'm all for, entertaining movies and entertaining everything, but that the show business aspect, of UFO paranormal is I think toxic. It creates a toxic environment for real research, which is what we need. We need
Hmm.
a real hard science research,
Hmm.
and and I don't think we're going to get it because I think that oh my heavens, I'm looking here, the sunshine. Never mind. Um, uh,
Hmm.
I don't think we're ever going to get it because I don't think the powers that be want to fund this. And when I say the powers that be, I'm talking, of course, about government, basically, is what we're talking about. I don't think they want any serious, open, transparent study of any of this stuff for reasons they alone know why they would want to keep all of this under wraps. There used to be a lot of parapsychology laboratories, and all of a sudden they disappeared. All
That's
right, they're not
true.
there any
Yeah.
right, they're not there anymore. And I've been told, and this is a trust me, bro statement, but I've been told that it all went dark, meaning that there came a point when the stuff that was really interesting was basically eaten up by the security people. And that's why we don't have we no longer have parapsychology labs in colleges and stuff like that because they want all of that research under their control. They don't want transparency. And I mean, and I laugh at the disclosurists because I don't mean to be cruel, but I mean I lose patience. Um, they actually think, or I want a disclosurist to explain to me how the U.S. government can prove that they have disclosed everything. And yeah, exactly right. All right, let's say that they have this trove of information. All right, and we're going to go to Congress and we're going to disclose and on and on and on. How do we know if we didn't trust them for 70 years when they were lying to us about UFOs? Why now then do we trust the same institutions that are going to be transparent and disclose the truth?
Yeah,
All right,
totally.
I
Yeah.
mean, explain this to me. All right, yeah, no, I just don't get it. Now, I'm not anti-government, and I'm not even anti-military or anti-IC. Um, um, I, I'm, I'm I'm not. I'm when they are performing their legitimate legal functions, right?
Hmm.
Um, but I don't know what they know, and therefore I feel very conservative on the subject of what they disclose because I don't know what the impact on, again, the magic words, national security would be if they released all this data. And all right, then the other thing, so anyway, whatever they release, it won't change ufology at all because if the information they release does not line up with what I think is going on, then they're lying. And
Hmm.
so the same thing will go on forever. The evidence
Yeah.
will be rejected, and yada 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 yada. All right. So there's that, you know.
This kind
Um,
of, yeah,
yeah, but there's the
preservation
other,
by
yeah,
delusion.
yeah, I know, yeah. But then but then there's another sweet one. The other
Mhm.
sweet one is what if the government is not disclosing anything because they actually don't have anything?
Yeah.
No one will believe that. I mean, no one will believe that. But what if it's the truth? What if they've
It's
got is all these anecdotal reports, and they've got grainy videos and on and on, the kind of stuff that we see. If that's all they've got, it doesn't prove anything,
hmm
So, but as I said, no one in the UFO world wants to consider the option that the government actually is covering up its ignorance
hmm
because they don't want the American people to realize that no, the U.S. government doesn't necessarily have control over our skies. All right.
That's
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, if that were an announcement, by Pete Hegseth, the whole country's hair would be on fire. No, we don't control the security of our own skies. You know. All right. So that's the reason that, I pay attention to the goings on in Washington, and as a former journalist with a considerable experience in dealing with government, right?
Hmm.
I just sigh and sit back and say, "Get me my popcorn." You know,
Yeah.
get me because, but again, and I don't want to get personal,
It's
so I'm not going to use names. But I would simply say that most of the elected representatives in Washington who are the hottest on the UFO issue would never be described as the sharpest tools in the drawer.
That's
Okay.
true. That's
I know,
true.
right, right. The two people who I would be considered to be quite credible, Rubio, who now is backed up 10,000 miles from
Hmm.
previous statements. He doesn't talk about this anymore. And Senator Gilliland, Gillibrand from New York, really
Hmm.
smart woman, really together. The two or three people that I would consider to be credible, that I would pay attention to, have been notoriously quiet on this subject now for a year or two.
Oh.
And it's the right, if you haven't noticed. I mean, and I mean, admittedly, Rubio's busy because apparently Rubio does every job in the federal government that that Trump thinks up yesterday. I mean, Secretary of State, he's blah, blah, blah. But Rubio's busy. All right. But the other people who involved in this are I would describe as not busy, which is the reason that they're involved with UFOs. Also because it gets them enormous visibility. You know, it gives them an issue. It gives them on and on. So, but the long way of saying I am really unimpressed with the way things have been going with the so-called Washington movement toward, with Arrow,
Mhm.
with the hearings in Senate and House of Representatives in Congress. I don't think we're getting anywhere at all, and I suspect that's on purpose.
I agree. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think the whole thing. Yeah,
yeah, it's a distraction, I think,
yeah,
as a large
yeah,
portion.
yeah.
Hmm.
There's there really isn't anything there. There is this fight about the NDAs. And I understand from people I respect that there actually is no fight here. That the people who need NDAs have been waivers have already been happening, and yet I don't see these people on talking on CNN. So if they're no longer going to prosecute you for violating your NDA, then why aren't you talking about what you know? Why aren't you offering the actual proof, the actual names, the actual everything? So I mean, I'll just leave it there. But, uh,
Yeah, no, I resonate a lot with what you're saying. Something that I've been thinking a lot about when you brought this that made me think of this when you brought it up in terms of the government's involvement with psi with psychic phenomena research. Um, and the fact that this idea that maybe that it went black basically they're still doing the research but they've gone into hiding because they found something.
well, yeah,
um
but again, this is a trust me, bro statement.
right, it's
There are
yeah,
there are people whose judgment and integrity I respect who claim that this is the case.
yeah,
Again, I'm repeating hearsay. Yeah, but
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, and I mean that statement could mean really different things too depending on like sort of like what different substrates of reality are actually like, and what the actual, nature of existence is or something. But like,
yeah,
but like I've been thinking about this idea a lot of like, maybe that these like kinds of phenomena that they sort of take place in negative space, or like,
yeah,
like George P. Hansen talks about anti-structure,
yeah,
like it might be that the reason why we have such hard time studying or like describing or in any kind of way interfacing with a lot of these phenomena could be because they actually take place in zones of information that we kind of avoid as humans. You know what I mean? Like the negative space, like the negative space in a picture. You're not supposed to look at the negative
Right, right.
space, but
Yeah.
you look at the objects. And maybe that's why, that maybe that's why like the military and the Pentagon and the CIA and stuff like that would be so secretive is because some of these phenomena are secretive by nature.
By nature. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, um, the UFO Encyclopedia, edited by Jerry Clark,
Hmm. I'm
and
very familiar with that book. Yeah.
right, yeah. Well, he has his own theory of what he calls experience anomalies,
Hmm.
meaning that he feels that it's possible that a lot of what is happening here is not an anomaly out there, it's an anomaly in here. Right.
Hmm.
And he's not denying the reality of the experience. He's just saying that we live our, we get up in the morning, we go through our lives, we go to, on and on. We have a certain idea of what experience is, normal, ordinary experience is. And admittedly, most of us live 99% of our lives in that zone. He's saying that there are possibly existences of experience that are rare that are actually producing a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, and I've always been fascinated by that theory. I don't think I did it justice in my remarks because it's been a few years since I read his stuff on this. But the
Hmm.
I've always keep in mind is the anomaly time or space? Is the anomaly experience? Is the anomaly physical? These are all questions I'm asking myself when I ponder these things. So
Yeah.
you can be walking around having a normal experience of life, and for one reason or another, boom, this other zone drops by for a while. All right. And then you're back to your other thing. And it all gets very complicated because as I told you, so my oldest, dearest friend is a shrink, distinguished shrink. And so we talk questions about we've had many conversations about mental illness and
Hmm.
what is mental illness.
Hmm.
And this question is a hell of a lot more complicated than most people grasp.
Hmm.
We, in other words, there is behavior by the so-called mentally ill that may be perfectly rational in terms of the experience they're having. All right,
Hmm.
you know what? In other words, yeah, there are species of mental illness that are indeed pathological, indeed sickness. But there are species of mental experience that are highly unusual, but are not sick
Yeah.
or unreal.
Hmm.
Yeah, and Jerry Clark's work
Absolutely.
has looked at that, and I think it's worthwhile. Very worthwhile reading his own works as opposed to what you find at the editorial work in the encyclopedia, which of course is a classic.
Hmm.
But there's that. So crazy people may not be crazy. They simply may be tuned into and perhaps stuck on another frequency, you know. And if they're and by simply assuming they're sick, you're passing up a possible way of helping them. It's easy to dismiss he's schizophrenic. Well, what does that mean? You know, you saw what I was saying. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think, and there's definitely a lot of discourse in the last few decades about culture-bound syndromes because,
yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of people are like, a lot of people from India or, other cultures will be like, well, if you call this syndrome a culture-bound syndrome, why don't you call schizophrenia a culture-bound syndrome? Because
Mhm.
technically it is. It's a Western
Yeah,
concept.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I think that's really fascinating. And
yeah.
and I'll have
Now,
to check out Jerry Clark's
Yeah,
work on that because I
experience
was
anomaly. You can find it. It's on. It's you can Google. Well, this that's
cool.
great. Yeah, but I think I'm running out very low on my reserves of that deep perpetual wisdom that I represent. All right, as I said, I like John Keel. I am no authority on anything. That's how we start the discussion. All right,
Yeah.
and it really has been a pleasure talking to you and getting to know you.
You
You
as
know,
well, Michael. Yeah, I really hope that we can stay in touch and have more chances to interact. This has been really, really wonderful.
okay, and thanks for the invitation. Thanks for the invitation to be here.
Thank you for accepting the
Okay, all right,
invitation.
okay. Signing out, Portland. All
All
right,
right.
all right. Bye bye.
Bye.
Now
Okay.
how do we get out?